Sarah Chen stepped off the transport ship and looked up at the massive space station floating in front of her. Concordia was bigger than anything she had ever seen. The station spun slowly in space, creating artificial gravity for the thousands of beings living inside. She could see ships from dozens of different worlds docked at the outer rings. "Welcome to the Galactic Defense Academy," said a voice behind her. Sarah turned to see a tall, thin creature with blue skin and 4 arms. The being's voice sounded like wind chimes in her translator earpiece. "I am Commander Veltar. You must be one of the humans." Sarah nodded and shouldered her small bag. "Cadet Sarah Chen." "Reporting for duty, sir." Commander Veltar looked her up and down with large, silver eyes. Sarah knew what the commander was thinking. She was only 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighed about 130 pounds. Compared to the other species she could see walking around the docking bay, she looked tiny and weak. "Follow me," the commander said. "I will show you to your quarters and explain the academy rules." As they walked through the station's corridors, Sarah saw amazing sights. Creatures made of living crystal floated past, their bodies glowing with inner light. Beings that looked like walking clouds of gas moved through special tubes in the walls. Robot-like entities, with glowing circuits under transparent skin, marched in perfect formation. "The Academy trains the best warriors from across the galaxy," Commander Veltar explained. "Each species brings their natural advantages. The Corathons have incredible strength and armored skin. The Zephyrite can manipulate energy with their minds. The Netharis can become invisible and pass through solid objects. The Nexans calculate the perfect solution to any problem in seconds." They stopped at a door marked with human symbols. "Your room," the commander said. "Classes begin tomorrow at sunrise. Try to keep up." Sarah's room was small but comfortable. Through the window, she could see Earth in the distance, a blue and green ball floating in the black of space. She had trained her whole life for this moment. Growing up on Earth, she had joined the military as soon as she was old enough. She had served in special forces units in the hottest combat zones on the planet. When the galactic government contacted Earth, they had been shocked to learn that humans were a warrior species. Most of the galaxy had given up fighting long ago. They used technology and natural abilities to solve conflicts. The idea of a species that actually enjoyed combat was fascinating to them. The next morning, Sarah made her way to the main training hall. The room was enormous, with different sections for different types of training. She could see obstacle courses, combat rings, and simulation chambers. Hundreds of cadets from dozens of species were already working out. "Look what crawled out of the dirt," said a deep, rumbling voice behind her. Sarah turned to see a massive creature standing over her. The being was at least 8 feet tall, with green and brown scales covering his body like natural armor. His arms were as thick as tree trunks, and his yellow eyes looked down at her with amusement. "I am Thraxzul of the Corathan warrior caste," the creature said. "You must be one of the new human pets." Other cadets began to gather around them. Sarah could see creatures of all shapes and sizes watching the conversation with interest. "I'm Sarah Chen," she said calmly. Thraxzul laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "Nice to meet me? Human, do you understand where you are? This is an academy for warriors. The weak do not belong here." A floating crystal being drifted closer. "Thraxzul speaks truth," it said in a voice like singing glass. "Humans have no natural advantages. No armor, no special powers, no enhanced intelligence. Why were they even accepted? Probably to make the rest of us look better," said a Nexan, its circuit patterns glowing brighter with what Sarah assumed was laughter. Sarah felt her face grow hot, but she kept her voice steady. "Maybe we'll surprise you." "Surprise us?" Thraxzul leaned down until his massive head was level with hers. "Human. Your entire species could not lift the weights I use for warm-up. Your bones would break if you tried to keep up with our basic training." You are soft, weak, and slow. The crowd of aliens murmured agreement. Sarah could see pity in some of their faces, amusement in others. That's enough. Commander Veltar's voice cut through the noise. The crowd scattered as the instructor approached. All cadets report to your assigned training groups. Humans will begin with basic physical conditioning and classroom instruction. As the other cadets moved to the advanced training areas, Sarah found herself directed to a small section of the gym with basic equipment. The other 11 humans were already there, looking just as out of place as she felt. Don't let them get to you, said Marcus, a tall man from the European Federation. We're here for a reason. Are we? Asked Linda, a woman from the African Union. Look around. Every other species here could kill us without thinking about it. Sarah looked across the hall at Thraxul, who was lifting weights that probably weighed more than her entire body. Next to him, a Zephyrite was moving objects with its mind while a Netheri phased in and out of solid matter. Maybe, Sarah said quietly. But they haven't seen what humans can really do yet. She thought about her training on Earth. The 20-mile runs with full gear. The combat exercises that lasted for days without sleep. The simulations where failure meant watching your teammates die. Earth was not a gentle world. And humans were not a gentle species. But she would wait. She would watch. She would learn. And when the time came, she would show them exactly what a human could do. 3 weeks had passed since Sarah arrived at the academy, and the pattern was always the same. Every morning, the humans reported to their basic training area, while the other species moved to advanced combat simulations. Every afternoon, they sat in classrooms learning theory while aliens practiced real fighting techniques. Sarah watched from across the training hall as Thraxul sparred with a Nexan combat robot. The Korathan's massive fists struck with enough force to dent steel, while his armored skin turned away the robot's energy blasts without leaving a mark. When the match ended, Thraxul stood victorious while the robot sparked and smoked on the floor. Impressive display, Commander Veltar announced to the watching crowd. Thraxul maintains his position at the top of the combat rankings. The big Korathan flexed his muscles and roared in triumph. Other cadets cheered or made their species equivalent of applause sounds. Sarah noticed how they all looked at him with respect and fear. The ranking system is simple, Commander Veltar continued. Combat ability determines your status in the academy. The strongest lead training missions. The weakest observe and learn. Sarah looked at the holographic display showing the rankings. Korathans dominated the top 10 positions. Zephyrites and Netheris filled the middle ranks. Nexans, despite their intelligence, ranked lower due to their weaker physical forms. At the very bottom, below everyone else, were the 12 humans. Chen, Commander Veltar called out. Your group has been assigned to observe today's tactical exercise. Do not interfere with the real warriors. The exercise was a simulation of defending a space station from attack. Sarah and the other humans sat in the observation deck, while mixed teams of aliens worked together on the main floor. She watched as Thraxul took command of the largest team. Listen to me, weaklings, the Korathan growled at his teammates. I will handle the heavy fighting. The rest of you provide support, and try not to get in my way. The simulation began with enemy ships attacking from multiple directions. Sarah could see the tactical display showing weak points in their defense, but Thraxul ignored his teammates' suggestions and charged straight at the strongest enemy position. He's making a mistake, Sarah said quietly to Marcus. If he pulls too many defenders to the main assault, the enemies can break through on the flanks. Should we tell them? Marcus asked. They won't listen, Linda replied. Look at them. They think raw strength is all that matters. Sarah was right about the tactical situation. Within minutes, enemy forces had broken through the weak spots in their defense and were attacking the command center. Thraxul's team failed the exercise completely. Disappointing, Commander Veltar announced. Perhaps next time you will work better as a team. After the simulation ended, Sarah approached Throxzul. The Korathon was standing with several other top-ranked cadets, his yellow eyes still burning with anger over the failure. "Excuse me," Sarah said politely. "I noticed during the exercise that the enemy was using a classic pincer movement. If you had kept some defenders on the flanks while you attacked the center, you could have—" "What did you say?" Throxzul turned to face her, his massive form casting a shadow over her small body. "I was just suggesting that maybe a different tactical approach might have worked better," Sarah explained. The other aliens began to laugh. A Zephyrite's crystal body chimed with amusement. "The human thinks she understands tactics," it said. "How amusing," added a Nexon. "My computational matrices show that humans rank below most primitive species in strategic thinking." Throxzul stepped closer to Sarah. "Human, you were not even allowed to participate in the exercise. You sat in the observation deck, like a child watching adults work. What could you possibly know about real combat?" "I know that pride can make even the strongest warrior lose," Sarah said quietly. The big Korathon's eyes flashed with anger. "Pride? You dare lecture me about pride?" He reached out with one massive hand and shoved Sarah backward. She stumbled, but managed to stay on her feet. "Know your place in the natural order, human," Throxzul snarled. "You are prey animals pretending to be predators. Soft, weak, and stupid. The galaxy has no use for your kind except as servants." The crowd of aliens murmured agreement. Sarah felt her hands clench into fists, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Maybe you're right," she said. "Maybe humans don't belong here." Throxzul smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Finally, some wisdom from the monkey." Sarah nodded slowly. "There's only one way to find out for sure." She looked up at Commander Veltar, who had been watching the entire exchange. "Sir, I request a formal combat assessment," Sarah announced in a clear voice that carried across the training hall. The hall went completely silent. Even the floating Netharis stopped their constant movement to watch. Commander Veltar's forearms moved in what Sarah had learned was a gesture of surprise. "Cadet Chen, you understand what you are requesting? A combat assessment against a top-ranked warrior could result in serious injury or death." "I understand, sir. And if you fail, it will prove that humans are not suitable for combat training. Your entire species could be removed from the program." Sarah felt the weight of that responsibility. She thought about her 11 human teammates, about everyone back on Earth who was counting on them to prove that humanity belonged among the stars. "I understand that too, sir." Throxzul threw back his head and laughed. "This is perfect. I accept the challenge. It will be my pleasure to show everyone exactly how weak humans really are. I resign." Commander Veltar looked uncertain. "This is highly irregular. Perhaps a simulation would be more appropriate." "No," Sarah said firmly. "Real combat. No simulations. No safety protocols. If we're going to do this, let's do it right." The commander's silver eyes studied her for a long moment. "Very well. The assessment will take place tomorrow at noon in the main training hall. Standard protocols apply. Non-lethal combat until one opponent yields or is incapacitated." As the crowd began to disperse, Throxzul leaned down close to Sarah's ear. "I hope you have made peace with your gods, human," he whispered. "Because tomorrow, I am going to break every bone in your weak, little body." Word of the combat assessment spread through the academy like wildfire. By noon the next day, every cadet, instructor, and staff member had gathered in the main training hall. The massive space buzzed with conversation in dozens of different languages, as beings from across the galaxy came to watch what many believed would be a massacre. Sarah stood at one end of the combat circle, a 30-foot diameter ring marked on the reinforced floor. She wore the Academy's standard training outfit, a simple gray uniform that offered no protection or enhancement. Her hands were bare, her feet in basic training shoes. At the other end of the circle stood Thrak-Zul. The massive Korathan stretched his arms above his head, showing off muscles that bulged like boulders under his natural armor plating. His yellow eyes gleamed with excitement as he looked at the small human across from him. "This is madness," Marcus whispered to Linda in the human observation section. "Sarah knows what she's doing," Linda replied, but her voice shook with worry. Commander Veltar floated between the two fighters, his forearms spread wide for attention. "The rules are simple," he announced. "Combat continues until one fighter yields or is rendered unable to continue. Lethal force is prohibited. Medical teams are standing by. Resard." Sarah could see the medical teams positioned around the circle. Beings with advanced healing technology waited with floating stretchers and emergency equipment. They were clearly expecting to need them. "Fighters, are you ready?" Commander Veltar asked. Thrak-Zul roared his agreement, a sound that echoed off the walls and made several smaller aliens step backward. "Ready," Sarah said quietly. "Begin." Commander Veltar quickly moved out of the circle. For a moment, neither fighter moved. Thrak-Zul stood with his arms spread wide, inviting attack. Sarah remained still, watching and waiting. "What are you waiting for, human?" Thrak-Zul taunted. "Are you so frightened that you cannot move?" The crowd laughed at his words. Sarah ignored them, keeping her eyes focused on her opponent. She had studied Korathans for 3 weeks, learning their strengths and weaknesses. They were incredibly strong and tough, but they relied too much on their natural advantages. They expected to overpower their enemies through brute force. Thrak-Zul grew tired of waiting. He charged forward with surprising speed for something his size. His massive fist aimed at Sarah's head. The punch came fast and hard, with enough force to crush a normal human skull. Sarah moved at the last second, turning her head just enough to let the fist pass by her ear. She could feel the wind from the blow and smell the musk of the alien's skin. Before Thrak-Zul could recover, she struck back, driving her elbow into his ribs. The elbow strike hit exactly where she aimed, but Thrak-Zul's armored scales turned away the blow without damage. He laughed and backhanded Sarah across the face, sending her stumbling across the circle. The crowd cheered as Sarah hit the ground and rolled. When she stood up, her lip was bleeding, and her cheek was already starting to swell. "Is that all humans can do?" Thrak-Zul called out. "I have been hit harder by children." Sarah wiped the blood from her mouth and moved back toward the center of the circle. This time, when Thrak-Zul attacked, she didn't try to hit his armored body. Instead, she went low, sweeping at his legs. The big alien jumped over her sweep and tried to stomp down on her back. Sarah rolled away and came up running. For the next few minutes, the pattern continued. Thrak-Zul would attack with overwhelming force, and Sarah would dodge, weave, and strike back when she could. But her strikes did no damage to his armor, while every hit he landed sent her flying. "This is painful to watch," said a Zephyrite in the crowd. "Why doesn't she just yield?" "Human pride," replied a Nexan. "They are too stupid to know when they are beaten." Sarah could hear the comments, but she ignored them. She was learning with every exchange. Thrak-Zul was strong and fast, but he followed predictable patterns. He favored his right hand for power strikes. He dropped his guard when he thought he had landed a solid hit. Most importantly, he was starting to get angry at her refusal to stay down. "Stand still and fight," Thrak-Zul roared as Sarah dodged another massive punch. "Stop running like a coward." "I'm not running," Sarah said calmly. "I'm waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For you to get careless." Thrak-Zul's eyes flashed with rage. He had never been in a fight that lasted this long. His natural superiority should have ended this in seconds. The fact that a tiny human was still standing, still moving, still fighting back, was making him furious. He charged again, this time putting everything he had into a massive overhead strike that would have crushed Sarah into the floor. At the last second, she stepped aside and let him punch the reinforced training surface instead. The impact cracked the floor and sent vibrations through the entire hall. Thraxul's fist was buried 6 inches deep in supposedly unbreakable material. But more importantly, the missed strike left him off balance and overextended. Sarah saw her chance. Instead of trying to hit him, she grabbed his extended arm and used his own momentum against him. She pulled him forward while stepping to the side, adding her strength to his uncontrolled charge. Thraxul stumbled forward, his massive body suddenly out of control. He tried to catch himself, but Sarah was already moving. She grabbed his armor plating and used it as a handhold, throwing her entire body into a perfect hip throw that she had learned in combat training on Earth. What happened next shocked everyone in the hall. Sarah's technique was flawless, using leverage and momentum to overcome superior size and strength. But what nobody expected was the explosive power behind her movement. Humans had evolved on a high-gravity world, developing bone density and muscle efficiency that other species couldn't match. When Sarah threw Thraxul, she didn't just redirect his momentum. She added tremendous force of her own. The 8-foot Karathan warrior flew through the air like he had been shot from a cannon. He traveled the full width of the combat circle and kept going, his armored body crashing through the supposedly unbreakable training mat like it was paper. But he didn't stop there. Thraxul smashed through the reinforced flooring beneath the mat, through the support beams below that, and disappeared into the corridor on the level below, in a shower of sparks and debris. The hall fell completely silent. Emergency alarms began to sound as automatic systems detected the structural damage. Medical teams rushed toward the massive hole in the floor where their top-ranked warrior had vanished. Sarah stood in the center of the combat circle, breathing hard but still on her feet. Her uniform was torn and dirty. Her face was bruised and bleeding, but her eyes were calm and steady. Commander Veltar floated over to her, his silver eyes wide with shock. "Cadet Chen," he said in a voice barely above a whisper. "What have you done?" The medical bay was chaos. Emergency teams worked frantically around Thraxul's massive form as he lay unconscious on a reinforced treatment table. The Korathan's natural armor had saved his life, but barely. He had 3 broken ribs, a severe concussion, and damage to his left shoulder that would take weeks to heal. Sarah sat on a smaller medical bed nearby, letting a Nexan medic treat the cuts on her face. The robot-like being's sensors kept scanning her, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. "Your bone density readings are off our charts," the medic said in its mechanical voice. "My instruments show muscle efficiency levels that should be impossible for a species your size." "Earth is different," Sarah said simply. Commander Veltar approached, his 4 arms moving in agitation. Behind him came the Academy's senior staff, the combat instructor, the xenobiology specialist, and the head of cadet rankings. They all looked confused and slightly frightened. "Cadet Chen," the commander began, "your performance data shows impact force levels that exceed our understanding of human capabilities. Our sensors recorded the throw that sent Cadet Thraxul through the training floor. The force involved was equivalent to a small vehicle collision." "The question is," interrupted the combat instructor, a crystalline zephyrite named Kasteth, "how did you generate that much power? Humans are classified as a low-strength species." Sarah finished letting the medic clean her wounds before answering. "Who classified us as low strength?" "Not. Our initial surveys of Earth showed humans averaging 200 pounds of lifting capacity," the xenobiology specialist said, consulting his datapad. "Your grip strength, bone density, and muscle mass, all tested within expected parameters for a gravity-adapted species." "Did your surveys test humans during combat?" Sarah asked. The aliens looked at each other uncertainly. "We tested volunteers in controlled conditions," Commander Veltar said. "Standard physical capability assessments." Sarah almost smiled. "You tested humans who were trying to be polite." Before anyone could ask what she meant, a groan came from Throxul's medical bed. The big Korathan was waking up, his yellow eyes unfocused and confused. What happened?" he mumbled in his deep voice. Sarah stood up and walked over to his bed. The medical staff tensed, but she moved slowly and kept her hands visible. "You challenged me to a fight," she said gently. "I threw you through the training mat." Throxul tried to sit up, winced, and lay back down. "That is impossible. You are tiny. Weak. How did you—" "I'm not weak," Sarah said. "None of us are. You just never saw us when we weren't holding back." The Korathan's eyes focused on her with new intensity. "Holding back?" Commander Veltar moved closer. "What do you mean, holding back?" Sarah looked around the medical bay at all the alien faces watching her. "Earth isn't like your worlds," she began. "We didn't evolve in paradise. Our planet tried to kill us every day for millions of years." She moved to the room's main display screen and called up images of Earth that she had brought from home. The screen showed hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanoes, and wild animals. "These are normal weather patterns on our world," Sarah explained. "This is what we consider a mild storm. These animals hunted our ancestors for food." The aliens stared at images of lions, sharks, and other predators. To species that had evolved on gentle worlds, or had been genetically perfected over generations, the creatures looked impossibly dangerous. But the worst predators on Earth, Sarah continued, were other humans. We spent thousands of years fighting wars against each other. Not clean technological wars like you've read about in your histories. Brutal, hand-to-hand combat where the strongest and smartest survived. She pulled up more images. Ancient battlefields, medieval armor, modern military training. "Every human you've met at this academy volunteered to be here," Sarah said. "But before we came, we went through selection processes that would break most species. We ran hundreds of miles carrying heavy equipment. We fought in simulations, where failure meant watching our teammates die. We trained until our bodies shut down from exhaustion. Then we got up and trained more. And Throxul was listening intently now, his warrior instincts recognizing something he hadn't seen before. On Earth, we have a saying," Sarah continued. "Train hard, fight easy. Everything we do in practice is harder than anything we'll face in real combat. When you pushed me during that exercise, when you told me I was weak, when you challenged me to this fight, you weren't seeing a human at full capability. You were seeing a human being. Polite." The xenobiology specialist was frantically taking notes. "But our scans showed normal human parameters." "Because we let them," Sarah interrupted. "Look, when your people first contacted Earth, we were terrified. Here were these advanced alien civilizations with incredible technology. And they wanted to meet with us. The last thing we wanted to do was seem threatening." She gestured toward the other humans who had gathered outside the medical bay. "Every one of us could have performed at this level from day one. But we held back because we wanted to be accepted. We wanted to prove we could fit in with galactic civilization." Commander Veltar's silver eyes were wide. "You mean all humans can fight like this?" "Not all," Sarah admitted. "But every human in this academy was selected from Earth's military forces. We're not normal civilians. We're soldiers who have trained our entire lives for combat." Throxul struggled to sit up again, his armor plates scraping against the medical bed. You let me think I was superior. You let me mock your species. Because I wanted to understand you," Sarah said. "I wanted to learn how galactic warriors think, how they fight, what their weaknesses are. And I learned something important." "What?" "You've all become too dependent on your natural advantages. Korathans rely on strength and armor. Zephyrite use energy manipulation. Netharis depend on phasing ability. But what happens when you face an enemy that doesn't fight the way you expect. The room was completely quiet now. Even the medical equipment seemed to hum more softly. On Earth, we learned to fight anything, anywhere, with whatever we had available, Sarah continued. We learned that battles aren't won by the strongest, or the fastest, or the smartest. They're won by whoever refuses to give up. Throxul looked at her with something approaching respect. You threw me through a reinforced floor, using nothing but technique and determination. I threw you through the floor because you expected me to fight like a Korathan, Sarah corrected. You thought strength against strength, armor against armor. You never considered that I might use your own power against you. Commander Veltar moved forward. This changes everything. If humans have been holding back this entire time, we have been, Sarah confirmed, but we don't want to anymore. We're tired of being underestimated. We're tired of being treated like we don't belong here. She looked directly at Throxul. The question is, are you ready to learn from us? The same way we've been learning from you. The big Korathan was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he nodded slowly. I believe I am. Human. I believe I am. 6 months later, the Galactic Defense Academy looked completely different. The training halls buzzed with new energy as mixed species teams worked together in ways that had never been tried before. Where once the different alien races had trained separately according to their natural abilities, now they learned from each other's strengths and covered each other's weaknesses. Sarah stood in the main instruction hall, wearing the silver rank insignia of a senior combat instructor. Around her, cadets from a dozen different species listened as she explained the principles of adaptive warfare. Combat is not about being the strongest or the fastest, she told the class. It's about understanding your enemy better than they understand you. In the front row, Throxul raised his massive hand. The Korathan had become one of her most dedicated students since their fight. His armor still showed the scars from being thrown through the training floor, marks he now wore with pride. Instructor Chen, he said in his rumbling voice. What if your enemy is stronger, faster, and better equipped than you are? Then you don't fight them on their terms, Sarah replied. You change the rules. She called up a holographic display showing a historical battle from Earth. This is the Battle of Agincourt, fought on Earth over 600 years ago. A small force of English soldiers faced a much larger army of French knights. The French had better armor, better weapons, and superior numbers. The display showed armored knights on horseback charging across an open field. The English couldn't win a traditional battle, so they didn't fight one. They chose the battlefield. They chose the time. And they used weapons the French hadn't prepared for. They won because they refused to play by the enemy's rules. A young Zephyrite's crystal body chimed with curiosity. But how do you know what rules to change? You study your enemy, Sarah said. You watch how they think, how they move, what they expect. Then you do something completely different. She looked around the classroom at the mix of alien faces. Korathans expect their enemies to meet strength with strength. Zephyrites assume everyone will fight at range with energy weapons. Natharis think all combat happens in 3 dimensions. But what if you faced an enemy that used none of those approaches? The cadets exchanged glances. These were concepts that challenged everything their species had believed about warfare. Instructor, said a Nexan, its circuit patterns glowing with processing power. My calculations suggest that this approach would be highly unpredictable. How do you train for something you cannot calculate? Sarah smiled. You train for everything. You prepare for situations you've never imagined. You learn to adapt when your plans fall apart. She gestured toward the door, where Marcus and Linda entered with another group of mixed-species cadets. These teams had been training together for months, learning to combine their different abilities in new ways. Marcus, show them the Mumbai exercise, Sarah said. Marcus nodded and activated another holographic display. This one showed a crowded urban environment with civilians, obstacles, and hidden enemies. Traditional galactic warfare doctrine says to use overwhelming force to clear the area, Marcus explained. But what if you can't? What if the enemy is hiding among innocent people? The hologram began to move, showing the mixed species team navigating through the simulation. A Korathan and a Nathari worked together, with the Nathari phasing through walls to scout ahead, while the Korathan provided covering fire. A Zephyrite used precise energy manipulation to disable weapons without harming civilians, while a Nexan coordinated the team's movements. The key is knowing when not to use your strengths, Linda added from her position at the control panel. Sometimes, the Korathan needs to be subtle. Sometimes the Nethari needs to become solid and hold ground. Sometimes the Zephyrite needs to fight, hand to hand. Throxul watched the display intently. 6 months ago, I would have called this cowardice. Now, I see it as wisdom. What changed your mind? Asked the young Zephyrite. The big Korathan stood up and looked around the room. I learned that being the strongest means nothing if you are also the most predictable. Instructor Chen taught me that there are many kinds of strength. Sarah nodded approvingly. That's the first lesson of human warfare. Your greatest strength can become your greatest weakness if you rely on it too much. A chime sounded throughout the academy, indicating the end of the class period. As the cadets began to file out, Commander Veltar entered the room. The academy's director looked pleased. A marked change from his initial skepticism about humans. Instructor Chen, he said with his musical voice. I have just received word from the Galactic Defense Council. They want to implement your training protocols across all academy worlds. Sarah felt a surge of satisfaction. All academies? All academies? All of them. Your adaptive warfare techniques have proven so effective that the Council believes they should be standard training for all galactic defense forces. Through the classroom windows, Sarah could see Earth hanging in the star-filled void. Her homeworld looked peaceful from this distance. But she knew better. Earth had shaped humanity through countless challenges. And now, humanity was sharing those hard-learned lessons with the galaxy. There's something else. Commander Veltar continued. The Council has also authorized the expansion of human enrollment in the Academy program. Instead of 12 cadets, we will be accepting 200. Sarah raised an eyebrow. 200? That's quite a change. The galaxy is beginning to understand that humans bring something unique to our defense forces, the commander said. Not just your physical capabilities, but your way of thinking about problems. Your refusal to accept defeat. Marcus and Linda had stayed behind after dismissing their own classes. What do you think, Sarah? Marcus asked. Ready to train 200 more humans? I think the galaxy is about to learn what Earth really taught us, Sarah replied. Which is? She looked out at the stars again, thinking about all the battles humanity had fought to reach this point. All the times they had been counted out, underestimated, or written off as inferior. All the times they had proven their critics wrong through sheer determination. That the most dangerous warrior isn't the one with the best weapons or the strongest body, Sarah said quietly. It's the one who gets back up no matter how many times you knock them down. Throxul, who had been listening from the doorway, nodded in agreement. The galaxy thought it was perfecting warriors by breeding out weakness and struggle. But humans showed us that struggle creates strength. As the group prepared to leave, Sarah took one last look around the classroom. The walls were covered with tactical displays, weapon specifications, and training schedules. But more importantly, they showed pictures of successful mixed-species teams working together. 6 months ago, the galaxy had seen humans as weak primitives who didn't belong among the stars. Now they understood that humanity's greatest gift wasn't any single ability, but rather their refusal to be limited by what others thought was possible. The Academy had taught the galaxy an important lesson. Perfection wasn't about eliminating flaws. It was about learning to fight with whatever you had, wherever you were, against whatever odds you faced. And in that regard, humans had become the perfect teachers. As Sarah walked out of the classroom, she could hear the sounds of mixed-species teams training together in the halls beyond. The future of galactic defense was being shaped by beings who had learned to combine natural advantages with human adaptability. The galaxy had spent eons perfecting warriors. Humanity had perfected something far more dangerous: soldiers who refused to quit.